t-shirt that says Xie Lian didn't know whether to laugh or cry on it. I now have that t-shirt and I love it so much because I filmed this video over a year and a half ago. At the time I was reading Heaven Official's Blessing, I was near the end of book 5 and I was really loving the books and I had so many thoughts about the characters and the story and random stuff that I really wanted to make a video about, and I knew that if I left it till I had like made a YouTube channel or finished the books or anything, I would forget my ideas. So I just made a video despite not really having a YouTube or anything, and I looked back at it recently and I was like, you know what, I still love this video, and a lot of the thoughts and ideas in it, well, all of them are still thoughts that I think about frequently, so I didn't forget them actually. And I had a lot of fun editing together this video, and I'm very excited to share it. Formal apology for my pronunciation of names and places. At the time of making this video, I hadn't really looked at the proper pronunciations for the names, and my pronunciations aren't very good, and I'm really sorry about that. You can also see a lot of times where I specifically avoid saying the names of characters or places because I don't want to get it wrong. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the video. So a few months ago, I had run out of books to read, and I kind of had Heaven Official's Blessing on my radar for kind of books that I was like, I've seen this a lot on the internet. It's probably something I would enjoy. And I'd read the first page in Waterstones, which had confirmed that I was like, this looks interesting. That gave me no idea of what was gonna happen in the book. I was not prepared for any of that, but anyway, that's something for later. And my mum was out with her friends near Waterstones and asked if I wanted anything. So I said, if you could get Heaven Official's Blessing, that would be pretty cool. So my mum and both of her friends went to the manga section of Waterstones, very surprised. Neither of my mum's friends had been to the manga section of Waterstones. It was a complete revelation to them, and I just find that very funny. So I got the book and I started reading it. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect anything that it was. The poking fun at the casual bureaucracy of the Heavenly Court, the narration that would just go off at tangents and then come back, the ability to constantly blend like really, really hard-hitting scenes with then random bits of comedy, all the coincidences. I didn't expect any of that, and I think those are a lot of the reasons why I fell in love with the books. And I fell in love with them very quickly and very hard. So I basically wanted to make a video about that and about kind of my experience of reading them, because I have very quickly become very, very passionate about these stories and these characters in a way I haven't for years. I haven't read a book series in a while. The last one I read was the Chaos Walking Trilogy, which is a very different pace. It reminded me of like the first time listening, like being read Lord of the Rings. And I've loved just being able just to dive into a world that is so complex and well-built and multi-layered has been something that I haven't experienced in a while, and it's been really fun. Apart from what the first page of the book that was in Waterstones could tell me, the only two things I basically knew about Heaven Official's Blessing was that it was gay and there was a scene with a coffin in it. That is all I knew. So it was a vibe. Starting with talking about the main character, I find Xie Lian a very interesting character to watch, because although the trope of sort of someone who kind of grows up with kind of a very, very intent about what they're gonna, you know, do with their life and in a very strict system, and then kind of through a series of events becomes completely opposite and very out of the system for a while, and then is now working in the system and in their own system, kind of, that's not, you know, an unusual trope, but I find the way Xie Lian reacts to situations and moves generally very interesting to watch. Partly because he doesn't care about so much anymore, and his reactions are so based on the context and the circumstance of what's going on, which I enjoy, because one thing I often struggle with in books is that the characters feel very two-dimensional. It's like, oh yeah, they're just moving from these 3 drivers in every single situation, which isn't what real people do. So having a character who will do this great epic speech about being God simply to use as a distraction to then throw meatballs into the mouths of a bunch of people who want to fight him is amazing. And I'm just remembering how much, how unhinged so much of the books are. That was something else I wasn't expecting, was the amount of chaos in the books. Not ready for that. But yeah, just having a character who is able to move like that through a space is very rare, and I've never experienced it in a main character. I love the way they show his complexities. Just because he's diplomatic doesn't mean he couldn't destroy things. Just because he has usually a great sense of what's going on and how to react, that doesn't mean he doesn't laugh in inappropriate situations. And I think that's great to have that represented in a book, and that's something that I've really enjoyed in the book, is the amount that the characters feel like they have personalities, but they also have that kind of diversity of how they react is different in every situation, because real people are like that. About the end of the first book, I started to realise how much I related to him as a character, and that has only kind of grown throughout reading the books, to the point where most of the time when Xie Lian opens his mouth, I feel very called out. But that's been interesting again, because I, growing up, haven't had a lot of characters that I've related to because of being quite sensitive and not fitting into the system and being very aware of things on kind of an emotional level means that a lot of kind of the spaces that, you know, kids hang out in, I was like, no, this feels toxic, there's too much going on, I don't want to be there. So having a character that I feel like has that sensitivity but also doesn't have the classic stereotype of like sensitivity coupled with, I don't know, not being able to kind of be confident with things. Like I feel like you often get that with characters, like they're sensitive, so like they're shy or they're not confident with things. So I've really enjoyed having a character who feels sensitive, but that doesn't mean they're not strong, and having that representation. And that's something I've seen in other media I've consumed in the last few years, but especially having it in this form I've really enjoyed. One thing I've mentioned before, but I just love so much about it, is how chaotic it is. I have this thing with consuming media where there's a level of chaos that it gets to where I'm like, yeah, no, that feels about realistic. Like, that feels like it could happen, you know? And I feel like Heaven Official's Blessing just does that perfectly. And I love how so few of the scenes, I don't know, feel fully, well, I don't know, serious isn't the right word, but just how many of the scenes just have these really goofy elements to them. Just like, even if it's not funny, I'm still laughing at the way something is phrased, or just something going on. And again, one thing I feel like really benefits from the fact that these characters are really experienced is that you will get really funny moments in the middle of battle because they've done this a million times before. They're invested, but they know what they're doing, you know, so they're not hyper focused on everything. And you just get these really, really funny moments, like the fact of Xie Lian complimenting people's fighting styles, and everyone's like, wait, that's not a good thing, they're fighting you! And just all these random little bits that have made me laugh so much. I've laughed so much while reading Heaven Official's Blessing, and I didn't expect it to be funny. Like, that's not something I expected it to be when I started reading it. I wasn't like, oh yeah, this is gonna make me laugh so hard. But it has, and just every time I've read it, I felt like it's got better. Like, every arc I'm kind of more invested in the story, and I feel like a lot of authors kind of make that mistake. It's like, once you've got kind of the base layer, you can build off and you can do more things, and some authors just don't. They just kind of keep doing the same thing again and again. And that's something I've really enjoyed with Heaven Official's Blessing, is that it doesn't do that. It keeps doing new things and different things, and every arc has a completely different feeling. It's like, okay, now we're on a walking trip, I guess, with a bunch of random characters from previous arcs, you know? Or like, now we're just apparently being chased by these random cultivators. That's what's happening. You know, just the way kind of things flow with not having a kind of particular, this is the one goal of the entire books, is something I've really enjoyed, because most of the time life isn't like that. And again, it doesn't have to be like life, but the way I consume media, I enjoy the ability to capture the human experience. And most of the time, life isn't like you have this big goal and it's the one thing you're doing. It's like, okay, there's this chapter, and then there's this chapter, and they link together in this way, and then there's this one coming up from a little while ago that's resurfacing. And I feel like it does that quite well in a lot of places. I love the way that everything's kind of connected, and you will have things coming up from like 300 years ago or 800 years ago or whatever. And I wish I saw that more in a lot of books I read, because the characters are younger and there is less focus on their past. But like, I am 17, but I will still kind of like have things like, oh, that reminds me of, you know, that thing 6 years ago that I'm nostalgic about, or that chapter, or oh, I'm really missing this person who I haven't seen in 6 years, or whatever. And I kind of wish you had that more in books with characters that weren't 800 years old, because I really enjoy that feeling of a past and kind of having got to this point and having all this past and all this future, and I appreciate that. It makes them feel kind of more three-dimensional in a way. And I love the just absolute coincidences you get of everything being connected, and the fact that if I went back and I read like the arc in the desert, it would feel completely different, because like, you know that those 4 characters who were traveling together, they knew each other 800 years ago. You know, like, even if it was kind of slightly fleeting between some of them, you know, they were all in the same space. And I love the way that works, because it does mean that if I went back and read the books, it would be a completely different experience for me. I love the Xianle trio so much. Just the way they are so classically the archetypal trio of, you have the main character who is on this, you know, specific path which he's gonna follow, and he's special. And he's also oblivious and also overcomplicates things, but very genuine. And then you have kind of the character who he's known for longer and kind of have like a friendship with, and they're also from a slightly similar background, so they kind of have that in common, and that kind of like childhood friend slightly energy between the two of them. And then you have the third character who's like the brains of the operation in some ways, who kind of is a lot more critically thinking about things perhaps, and perhaps in a lot more negative way, but often just in a way that's realistic, and is slightly aside from the other two because they're from a very different background, and perhaps kind of background they didn't grow up in this. And I love how you have that classic trio, and I feel like that makes them really strong as a group. And all of the stuff I've seen between the 3 of them is so sweet, and it makes me very happy. So I've loved getting to see. It's one of those things when you join the fandom, you're like, okay, so there's this main ship, and then there are a few other ships, and then it's like, oh no, there are so many ships, and the dynamics of them are all amazing. So I've loved getting to see that. But just seeing those 3 characters together, and the fact that he comes up with like a game to put them in timeout when they're arguing with each other is so funny to me. One thing I feel that MXTX does really well is being able to really well portray like micro interactions between people, and then like big events. I really enjoyed having the entire Xianle flashback for like, it was like 200 pages? I was not expecting that. Again, I feel like that's a really powerful move. You have to have a lot of faith in your readership to be like, yeah, no, we're gonna go back 800 years to where it began, fill some stuff in, here we go. Because it did, for most of it, feel like kind of a flashback. At least when I was reading it, to me, that might have just been how I read it. But because you didn't have the same kind of, I don't know, colour perhaps in the interactions, it felt like you were kind of being told a story and going back. But I felt like the way it was written was really well done to kind of give an idea of what that was like, and especially how just, oh my gosh, reading the bit where the child gets sick and you know that it's gonna, like, that child dying outside the walls of Xianle is gonna be like the catalyst for everything escalating. It was so hard to read because you know that that's gonna happen, and you know, like, the power of a martyr to a cause and how much that's just gonna completely ruin any kind of chance of salvaging the situation, and then having to read that. And I feel like it also plays off one of the things I find interesting, and another reason I relate to Xie Lian, which is the amount that he often tries and stands in the middle ground and tries to make both things work, or both sides happy. And I feel like Xianle is a perfect example of how, you know, that didn't work. And things completely fell apart, and it was really, really tragic. But I feel like when you see him, you know, present Xie Lian, in situations, you still see that kind of trying to find the best way in situations, but it just feels like he's able to temper that with chaos or with whatever to kind of do it in a way that works within the situation, rather than kind of it being very much a principle thing, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that comes with experience. Again, is kind of something that I've suddenly experienced through things I've been through in the last few years, is kind of perhaps before I would move from kind of a more kind of systemed way of looking at things, I have my idea of the world and how it works. But through realizing how much things change, that is no longer how I operate as a person. And I feel like I operate more based on different situations and the need of that situation. So not like not thinking about myself, but moving differently. Hualian quickly became a massive comfort, and also one of my favourite ship dynamics I think I've ever seen. Quite classic in some dynamics, but it also feels very unique and very genuine a relationship, and that's what I really love, is just getting to see that slowly develop and having that slow burn energy. I think it's probably one of the best slow burns I've ever read. Have I read a slow burn before? I don't know. If it is, it's one of the best ones I've read. Just for the way it feels really natural from an emotional standpoint, in the way they kind of progress. And again, another thing I love about this writing is getting to see some of their emotions. I don't think you don't get any of Hua Chang's emotions, do you? But you suddenly get a lot of Xie Lian's emotions and overthinking of things, and I love that. I love how much Hualian just care about each other, and it makes my heart very happy. And I'm currently halfway through. I don't know the Mount Tonglu arc. They're just in the burnt down temple. And Xie Lian's like, oh yeah, I know what burnt wolves feel like, because what my temples were like. So I'm really interested to see where their relationship goes from there. I love how little of the miscommunication trope there is between them, because that really frustrates me. There were points I remember feeling slightly annoyed during the arc trying to get Mingyi back from Ghost City, because Xie Lian wasn't communicating with Hua Chang, and I was like, but you could communicate. But I don't know, that also, looking back on that, felt quite realistic, and like, you know, things happen. But Xie Lian right now still has not answered Hua Chang's question of what happened during the night Mount Tonglu first opened. And I feel like he has to at some point, and I'm interested to see when that is. I'm also interested to see what happens from where I am now, because I feel like there are a lot of people, a lot of heavenly officials who have a reason to go to Mount Tonglu. You know, Lingwen, is Lingwen still with the Brocade Immortal? I don't know. But if she was, she might be at Mount Tonglu. And, you know, is Mooching still trying to clear his name? I don't know what he's doing. Yeah, and likewise with Feng Xin, like, is he trying to go after Lang Chang? Like, I don't know what's happening. I'm also hoping I pronounced those names correctly, because I don't know. But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens, because it'd be really funny if the kiln was just full of heavenly officials. And I feel like we're gonna get some of Hua Chang's backstory. So I'm very excited to see where that goes, because we don't know much about his backstory. And we're starting to get to see his backstory, and it's interesting. So I feel like a lot's gonna happen, but we're at that point in the arc where you're getting all this information, but you don't know how it fits together yet. You're just trying to like work out the puzzle piece. Like, was the state preceptor who was like Xie Lian's mentor? What did he have to do with the kingdom, the ruins of which they're now in? I'm interested, and also the character I keep seeing mentioned on TikTok, and I'm like, when are they showing up? I'm excited. So I'm excited to see where it goes from where I am now in the book, because yeah, and I'm hoping I'm not going to finish book 6 before my birthday, book 5 before my birthday, because I'm not ready for the angst yet, and I'm like, I want to wait till after I finish book 5, then I can have the angst. And cry, probably, because everyone seems to have cried so far. So we'll see. I mean, saying that, I didn't cry at Blackwater. I've cried at other bits. I find the amount of liminality in Heaven Official Blessing very interesting, because, you know, you have, you know, in so many levels, the existence of the main characters' existence is very, very liminal. You know, the way that Xie Lian isn't part, he's not like, he's been banished twice, he's not like, he hasn't got all the powers of a god or like the spiritual powers of a god, but he's also not mortal. But you know, he's not a ghost, he's very much in between. And then the fact that Xie Lian, a lot as a character, his role is to stand in the middle and to be the voice of, not, well, voice of reason in a lot of situations, and the one being like, okay, let's work this through. And then similarly with like Huachang, his existence is very liminal. Like, he didn't really, as a child, he was on the outside. And then I don't know his backstory, so I can't comment on any of that. We're talking about the Blackwater arc, because that was a trip. I found the first bit really funny. The double date arc. You had like Hualian and Beef Leaf. Why are they called Beef Leaf? I still don't know that. Anyway, Hualian and Beef Leaf just kind of was so goofy, and I couldn't work out why. I was finding it really, really funny, and then I was like, oh yeah, it's all the suppressed emotions and stuff going on, because you've got this very difficult relationship of both Huachang and Mingyi kind of bluffing, because Huachang can't say what's actually going on, and Mingyi is trying to orchestrate something very specific. But it was just, that entire thing was just such a trip. Just with like Xi Wen panicking so hard. Oh my gosh, when being dragged up by the Reverend of Empty Words. And again, I don't know, side note, I really appreciate the fact that they may be gods, but that doesn't mean they don't get scared. And especially Xi Wen would get scared. I love his character so much. It makes me so happy. I also made me really happy the fact that they changed the pronouns they're using for him depending on what form he is using. Because that's really cool. And I love watching. It's just one of those characters that as soon as, you know, they step into the scene, you're like, okay, this is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun. And I love the fact that even though, you know, a lot of the time he is quite carefree as a character and kind of quite, I don't know, silly isn't the right word, but yeah, bit of a goof. That doesn't mean that he's not helpful in situations or knows how the system works and knows how to play the system, because he does. And I love having that, because so often you have characters like that that are really devalued. That's another thing I really want to talk about at some point, but not in this video. Is that you often have the kind of the third, it's often the third member of the trio is kind of the character who often provides either the comedic relief or the grounding for stuff, and they're often devalued. People are just like, oh, they're just like silly or goofy or whatever, or you know, just stupid or dumb or whatever, and it's like, no, if it wasn't for them, the other two would overcomplicate things way too much and go off the rails. Anyway, so I loved that bit of the Blackwater arc. And then the fact you had that kind of little respite where kind of they went back to the shrine. I'm just remembering how much I laughed. Like the entire scene of breaking Xi Wen out of his own bedroom was so funny. They're like digging down and they're trying to work out if someone's above them. And again, here is my knowledge of the fact that I don't know how to pronounce the name of the general who is just a cryptid, and I love it. Who just they accidentally break into his room, and then he throws the bed at Pei Ming. That entire interaction, just I love. You cannot get more woke up and chose violence than waking up to find 3 intruders in your room and then throwing a bed at the person who asked you to attack them. Like, that is amazing. And I love it so much. Just and the drawing that goes with it in the book of just like Pei Ming getting hit by a bed. Sidetrack onto another thing I love about the story is how it doesn't take the straight line. When I'm reading books, as you probably already realised, I'm very focused on sort of the characters and how real it feels and how immersed I am able to be in the world. And one thing I love about Heaven Official's Blessing is that it doesn't take the straight... it's not straight at all, anyway. It doesn't take the straight option. They wiggle quite a lot and like it's not a straight line, you know, and they go back to things, you know, like the entire thing of taking Xinchuan to the Rainmaster's house, and then 5 minutes of like talking there, and then the next second they're going to the sea because his brother is in the middle of a trial, and Pei Ming's like, yeah, he's gonna want to know that you are safe, otherwise he is going to fail. I don't know, that always makes it feel more realistic to me. Oh my gosh. And I did really enjoy seeing how Xinchuan reacted to finding out everything and just the justified pain of it. And then the whole arc on Blackwater Island. One of my favourite scenes was Hualian making the fire. One of my favourite, hands down favourite tropes in media is when you have two characters just sitting by a fire and having a heart-to-heart talk. That is one of my favourite tropes because you get so much character development in that, and I just love that, and getting to see that. Oh, I love the fact that Hualian just hold hands all the time. Like, that's just something that they just do, and they just mutually come to the decision that they just hold hands, and I love it. It makes me so happy. It gave me a lot of the stuff that Heaven's Officials. I can't speak at this point. Oh well. Heaven Official's Blessing gives me very much Undertale energy. Like, in the way that you can have, well, very obviously, gods and monsters, ghosts, you know. Also in the ability that it is also very epic and very goofy at the same time, which I love, because it's never one or the other. That entire arc just did so much new stuff. It was just like, it felt like it was, because it was such a payoff of everything that come before, it was like one hit after another, which is something I really enjoy reading, because if you've like if you're really invested in the text, when you get those payoffs, it's so satisfying. So just having like the first time when they teleport back to the shrine, and then like basically the shack, you know, Xie Lian's little hut on the hillside, and then he teleports back into Xinchuan's body, and it's probably the first time I feel like he's done something that Huazhang has not expected him to do, and I loved reading that, and just when he and Xinchuan are communicating between themselves while in the same body. It's really interesting because I've never read anything like that where you're getting Xie Lian is experiencing Xinchuan's physical reactions to what Xie Lian is telling Xi Xinchuan, like, because they're in the same body. And when he said you had like that triple thing, which was so good, of being like, I think it was like, yeah, he's the Reverend of Empty Words, he's Blackwater, he's Heishuan, and just like said it like 3 different. It just made me so happy. And I don't usually get scared while reading books or jump while reading books, but when at the end of that chapter, just after he said that, I think you've got like a sentence where it's like, Ming Yi puts his hand on like Xi Xinchuan's shoulder. I really freaked me out. Because it's just, I didn't know if he'd overheard, you know. again, I love how it's a really serious scene, but you have this really goofy moment of like, the watermaster being like, "You're alive?" It's like, no, dude, I'm dead. I'm a ghost. Of course I'm not alive. What are you talking about? You went to my gravestone. This is amazing. And it felt so raw, that scene, and so real. Like, hey Xuan, hope I'm pronouncing that right. I should really look at the pronunciations. I haven't. Just being like angry that, you know, Qinchuan didn't know. Why did he get not to know? It felt like it came from a very raw, almost, if it had been done in a different way, it would have almost felt childish. If that makes sense, that it's just such a reaction of being like, well, how come he gets not to know all of this? How come he doesn't have that constantly on his conscience forever? And that, again, that second pause when he's like, you called the wrong person. So good. So amazing. And then you're teleported out of that into Hualian kissing Xie Lian. And I also the fact that Xie Lian, like, in any other circumstance would have probably freaked out, but he's so focused right now that he's just like, no, come back here, I need your spiritual energy back, just without a second thought. Again, I relate to that. Give me a goal that I'm focused on, and if I'm in a crisis situation, very different. And we still don't know where Xinchuan or Heishuan are. I was really interested that Xie Lian didn't mention the whole, you know, swapping fates thing back to the Heavenly Court, despite everything that's going on. Yeah, but it was a really interesting arc. I could keep talking about Heaven Official's Blessing for a while, but I think I'm done. That was some of my really chaotic, badly strung together thoughts on Heaven Official's Blessing. I really enjoyed, I wanted to do this video because I had a lot of thoughts, and I was like, this is something I can do a video on because I want to, so I did. If you enjoyed this, I post things on TikTok and on Instagram, which is the same name as it is here, unless I couldn't get that name, because I don't know, because I am past me. But anyway, thank you for watching. This is a reminder to drink water. You are very, very loved. You are valued. You're a really amazing, really cool human being, and I hope you're having a good day. I'm gonna go get lunch.